kids board games is a little bit like watching old kids movies. For the adults in the room, it's going to be a mix of boredom, sprinkled in with some moments of shock as you see the horrors you were unwittingly subject to in your formative years from a new perspective. Have you played Candyland since turning 7? My God.
And the medic gets out and says, oh my God. New guy's in the corner puking his guts out.
Today's list is going to be the top 5 board games to play with kids that are not kids games. So no kids versions, no Catan Jr., no My First Carcassonne, no Ticket to Ride First Journey. Even the kids games that I kind of like, Kids Chronicles or Unlock Kids. Every time I say that, I feel like it's just like a really dark, this war of mine kind of a game. Those games aren't eligible for this list. A couple honorable mentions before we get into this top 5. Tsuro. Tsuro is a game for up to 8 players where everyone has a stone that is going to follow whatever path is put in front of them. You will place path tiles down, and then any stones that are up against that tile are going to follow the path. And you're just trying to stay on the board for as long as possible. So it's a survival game. It's actually kind of similar to a web game that I think came preloaded with Google Chrome 15 years ago called Entanglement. What makes Tsuro a good game for both adults and kids is the fact that kids can just jump in and play it, and they don't really need to think that hard. You see, playing a turn in Tsuro, it takes one of the tiles that you have, and you'll have 3 to pick from, and placing it in front of your stone. Your tile will then follow that stone, and you hope to not fall off the board. It's fun for kids because so long as they get of that very basic concept, they should be able to last at least 1 or 2 turns. And if that doesn't sound like much, the game is pretty short. After that, it gets a little bit chaotic, and you never know what's going to happen. The kid might actually win sometimes. For the adults, it's fun because it's like you're playing with a computer character that's mildly psychotic. So the adults you're playing with might be like that anyway. The only reason why this didn't make the top 5 is because it is technically player elimination, and if your kids are getting knocked out of a game even 1 minute before it's over, you got to keep their attention now for 1 minute before you run it back again, which is not ideal. But besides that, it's still, I would say, 3 stars out of 5 for the kids, 4 stars for the adults, especially if they're good sports about it. The kids probably need to be at least 5, maybe 6. And it is a game where sometimes the kids can actually win legitimately, usually because they're not the target. The other honorable mention for this list is Ink and Gold. And this is an honorable mention because I haven't personally played this game with kids. I have been told that it's very good with kids by a friend that isn't famous, so I feel compelled to share it in case it's a very good observation. Ink and Gold is a push your luck game where you are trying to get gold out of a cave, and you and everyone else are jockeying to say, like, who's willing to be the riskiest. So the kids don't have hard decisions to make. Do you go for the gold or do you back out this round? And honestly, I would imagine most kids will probably be very aggressive and just say, like, yeah, they want to go for the gold, and that can be a very good strategy. That's why this game was recommended to me as being a good kids game. If it's not, I apologize for that. Ink and Gold, for those unfamiliar, is also referred to as Diamant, depending on what version you get. Now into the list. Number 5, Pitch Car. Pitch Car is a dexterity game. Well, it's a flicking game. You and everyone else are trying to get your little wood token with a race car on the top of it around a track in the least number of flicks. So what you do is you all take turns. You get 1 flick on your little car and a little sliding piece. Almost looks a little bit like a crokinole piece, but it's smaller. You just take turns and go around. If you like fall off the track, you gotta kind of place it back. That's not a good thing. You can skip across a little bit. It's not really designed for kids. You could say, for example, Ice Cool is designed for kids, and that's a flicking game. But Pitch Car is actually not designed for kids, but is easier to play for kids than Ice Cool. Because Ice Cool can be like a really frustrating flicking game because you're trying to get like a little wobbly penguin thing through doors and stuff. It actually can get pretty hard. You'll find situations where you just can't flick your guy out of it, and kids don't like being in that situation any more than adults do. Although adults actually can be kind of fun. There's some ways kids can be a good sport about things, but just being physically unable to flick something the right way is less fun for kids. Pitch Car, that doesn't really happen. You will have to make sure that the kids are reined in enough. Kids will often, they'll be like pushing the edge of like pushing their thing or trying to get an extra flick in. So if you can keep that under control, it's a fun experience. And I can tell you firsthand, I have seen a 5-year-old win a game of Pitch Car that had multiple adults in it. Especially if they start off like towards the front, then they can easily get ahead of the chaff as a lot of nonsense is going on, and they can win that game. So Pitch Car is a great game, especially if you have a kid that likes coming in first, which is, there's a lot of kids like that. 3 stars out of 5 for the kids. I would give it a solid 4 stars, maybe even 5 stars for the adults. It can be played down to 5. Might be pushing it to bring a 4-year-old into play, But a 5-year-old or 6-year-old could play that, as long as they're not a dirty cheater like I was when I was that age. Number 4, For Sale. For Sale is a classic small card game. It's actually a bidding game, which might be a surprising mechanic to hear on this list. For Sale works in 2 phases. First phase of the game, everyone's bidding on property cards. Oh, property are all houses, they're places to live. The nice ones, like the castle, will have higher numbers. The less nice ones, like the cardboard box, will have smaller numbers. It's a bidding game, and you have a limited amount of money to bid on these properties. But the reason why it works for kids is because it's actually a simple decision when it gets to your turn. You either raise the bid, or you back out and take the lowest numbered house. So when it comes to a kid's turn, you can easily prompt them with what to do. Do you want to take the lowest numbered house here and take half your money back? Or do you want to put more money in to try and get a better house? And if they don't have enough money to raise the bet, they're forced to just take a house, which some of them might be frustrated with. But, you know, like,
I don't want to have to caveat every single entry in this list that some kids are just impossible to play with. All of these games are for kids that are capable of playing, having an enjoyable experience playing a game with you. Probably same for parents too. I don't want to shit talk kids too much. Like, some adults are equally problematic.
Once you have all your properties, the second half of the game is then having buyers with a certain amount of money will pop up, and everyone picks one house every turn that they've already bought that they sell off. Now, this can be a little bit less fun to actually sell off your house, especially if you really wanted to get that space station house or that cardboard box because you love cardboard box houses. It's a simple decision. You just pick a house. Here's why it works so well with kids. For Sale is a very difficult game to win at. It's also a game where you will feel like you're doing well, and you will find out at the end of the game that you were not doing very well. So a kid that is trying to just get the houses that look like their favorites and aren't really even playing the numbers that well can easily win. It doesn't mean there's no strategy to the game, because there is strategy to the game, but there's so many layers of it that when you put in a little bit of randomness like the kid, it's funny. It's both possible, but also legitimate when the kid wins, because it's like, yeah, you came out first here. Everyone just like kind of screwed each other over here. Good job, kid. For Sale also put at 3 stars for the kids, especially if they like picking houses out. I'll put it at 5 stars for the adults. Kids would probably be about 6 to give them a shot at For Sale. Number 3. Ready, Set, Bet. Ready, Set, Bet is a gambling game. I'm going to ignore the potential downside of getting your kid into horse betting a little bit early. In Ready, Set, Bet, one person will be running a game by rolling dice. These will be rolling 2 dice. There is a horse that is number 7. If you roll a 7, you move horse number 7 1 space forward. While this is going on, everyone else who's playing, which is up to 8 players, and potentially more actually if you get multiple copies of the game, there's really no limit to the number of people that can play Ready, Set, Bet, are going to be placing bets on which horse is going to win. The game going on with the betting is interesting because some spots are better bets than others, so you have to decide as a bettor whether you get one of the spots for yourself earlier in the game and get those good bets in, not knowing what's going to happen, or wait and see how the race is kind of playing out a bit before trying to make sneaky bets later. That's not what makes an interesting kids game. What you do if you want Ready, Set, Bet to be a game to play with kids is you make the kids run the horses. That might sound strange. The kids are running the game. Yeah, because all the kids have to do is they roll the dice, quick little addition. It's 6-sided dice, so it's not crazy. And then move the horse. The only thing they have to remember is that if you roll the same number twice in a row, some horses get a bonus. And they don't get a bonus for like 3 times in a row. Thankfully, this is actually something that if a kid is forgetting, whatever adult standing next to them will probably notice that there was that they missed a bonus, so they can kind of nudge him. If you really want to be good sports about it, though, you could just say that whatever the kids do, whatever they remember, that's just the race, how it's going. You could even say that if they did the math wrong and whatever horse they move forward, that's what happened. Place the bet. Sorry. You could also have the kids running the game can place bets before each round, and they can win too. They don't have to be placing bets while everything's going on. That's actually how the game is designed. So you need the kids to be able to do basic math, or you can have multiple kids doing it. At least one of them needs to know how to do math. To be able to kind of do it at somewhat of a clip, though, I'd say you probably need a 7-year-old, potentially with other kids, though. Like, you could do it with, like, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old easily. So Ready, Set, Bet, 4 stars, because that is actually a fun activity for kids, because they're the ones that they care about which horses win. They're going to care without even placing bets. I saw it 5 stars for the adults. Ready, Set, Bet was my number 3 legit board game to play with kids. Number 2, Bugs on Rugs. Bugs on Rugs is a card drafting game. Round by round, you will be dealing out a bunch of bug cards on the table. So if you're playing with 3 players, you're going to deal out 7 cards each round. Do a little snake draft. You take turns drafting bugs. You can pick whichever bug you want and add to your hit. You take whatever bug you want and add it to your hand. One bug will be left over, and depending on which bug that is, it'll tell you everyone to do something. For example, like pass one card to your left. Bugs on Rugs works great for kids because it's a simple drafting game. Just pick whatever bug. Different types of bugs are going to have different scoring rules. That's what makes the game interesting. It's actually kind of like Sushi Go. The reason why I like Bugs on Rugs more than Sushi Go to play with kids is because the drafting the card out of the middle of the table is just a more fun and more engaging thing to do with kids. They're not necessarily just looking at their cards, their mind's off in La La Land, and they forgot to take one and pass it to the kid to the left who's not going to notice they're not getting new cards. Sushi Go can fall apart a little bit playing with kids. Bugs on Rugs, it's a lot tighter. And it's another game, kind of like For Sale, where the kids can win it. They can legitimately win it. It's random enough which cards come out that it's not obvious which combinations are going to be the best ones. They can make bad moves. Don't get me wrong. But it's one of the first games I've ever played where a kid won legitimately. And I think it was when my daughter was 5, she won this game. And it might have even been 4. The one potential downside with Bugs on Rugs with the kids is the wall powers at the end. If they like really want a certain kind of bug, they could end up getting forced into getting rid of a bug that they like, which if you're talking about like say 5-year-old or even trying to squeeze a 4-year-old in there, potentially an issue. Well, Bugs on Rugs, I would still say is a 5-star out of 5 for the kids. 4 stars out of 5 for the adults because Bugs on Rugs isn't that interesting of a game. It's only so great on its own merits. But you could play with 5-year-olds. And my number 1 board game for kids and adults, that's not to say this is the number 1 board game for adults. My number 1 board game for playing with both kids and adults, I'm blanking. Oh, Dixit. Yeah, some of you might have expected to see this up here. Dixit is a light storytelling game that's kind of like the apples to apples model, but it's different. So the way Dixit works is everyone has a hands of cards with fruity little pictures on it. And these pictures are very interesting. And they need to be interesting for the game to work. Everyone takes turns being the storyteller. They pick one of the cards from their hand and they tell a little story about it. There's almost no restrictions on what this story is like. You could say the story has to be like a sentence or so, but it could even just be a word. Heck, it'd be just a sound. Tell a story about the card, you put it face down. Everyone else takes a card from their hand that, in theory, could be from that story, and then puts it face down. You mix all the cards up, flip them over, and everyone votes on which card was the storyteller's card. Point scoring is based on how many people get right. So the storyteller in Dixit is incentivized to tell a story that's vague enough that not everyone will pick their card, because they don't get the maximum points that way. But also, at least some people will. This game, you can play with a 2-year-old. Take the 2-year-old, you show them a card. Like the 2-year-old maybe has a hand of cards. They don't need to hold the hand of cards. 2-year-olds aren't going to be able to do that. Show the card to the 2-year-old. No one else can see the card but the 2-year-old. Say, what's that? And the 2-year-old will say something. Maybe a word, maybe something, I don't know. Could be like mommy for a lot of the cards. It's kind of funny. Put the card down. That's the story. That's the right card. Everyone else puts theirs in. Mix them all up. Doesn't have to be the kid mixing them up. You just do it. And you flip them all over. Everyone puts their votes in. You don't even need the kid to run it to do anything because everyone can say like after, okay, voting is done, which one is the right one? Well, you can do process elimination. You don't even ask the 2-year-old to say which one was your card. You could have them point to it. They might be wrong. Honestly, a 2-year-old's initial read on just looking at a card is a very good story Dixit because it's going to be kind of vague. They're not going to say ponytail with gold ring around. They're not going to do that. Like they're just going to say something silly. It's really fun. 5-star with kids. The only time I had any downside playing with kids was I was playing Dixit with my now 5-year-old and realized how competitive he is. See, he was about to win and I was adding up the points for the last round and I moved a piece instead of his by mistake. That put him into second, and by the time I corrected it, I was like, oh, sorry. And he was just like a...
Baby, are you crying or are you smiling?
I'm happy.
Oh.
He would have been less shocked if, like, my hands started bleeding or something like that all over the board. But that's not a problem everyone's going to have. That's not even really necessarily a problem. We got to be sorting that out now. So that's your top 5. I had trouble titling this video because these aren't like adult games, but they're games for grown-ups. Let me know if I missed anything. If you like lists like this, be sure to subscribe to Jackson Game Room's Warfield, which I forgot to mention in the beginning of the video. That's who I am. I am Jackson Warfield, and I'll see you, hopefully not betting horses with kids, unless you're playing Ready, Set, Bet, and that would be an appropriate, use of your time there.